Hello, good day everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Manage Your Hotel Through Data, presented by Snapshot and Stay in Touch. I'm your host, Frigola, and I'm joined by my presenters today. First up is Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Stay in Touch, Ryan King. Ryan is a former hotelier with almost 20 years of experience that has spanned just about every department through the course of his hotel career. He worked at TravelClick, where he spent a good amount of his time consulting with individual properties and large management groups, helping them find technology to improve RevPAR and increase profitability. He has a love of technology that helps him discover new methods, enabling hoteliers to better engage their guests and thereby increase revenues through better service and marketing. He now spends his time working with other hospitality tech companies to help strengthen Stay in Touch's ecosystem in order to provide a world-class offering to all of Stay in Touch's clients. And joining us from Snapshot is Iris Steinmetz, VP of Product and Integrations. Iris carries over 25 years of experience working across the full spectrum of hospitality and technology. Iris started her career in hotel management, which provided a firsthand and insightful understanding of the customer and hotel operational needs. Since then, she has worked as technical product manager and later interface manager at Oracle Micros, where she gained expertise in CRS and CRM systems, as well as integrations and connectivity. Since joining Snapshot, Iris has led the successful integrations with over 45 PMSs within 2 years. Iris is considered an industry expert and chairs the HT&G Business Analytics Work Group. Once again, I want to welcome our audience, and I will give you guys a quick overview of today's agenda so you know exactly what to look forward to before I turn it over to our presenters. First up, we'll discuss capturing data throughout the guest journey, and our presenters will also talk about managing and activating your operational data, as well as designing and building a comprehensive data strategy. Of course, after the presentation, we will turn things over to the audience for Q&A, but please be reminded that you can send in questions at any point throughout the webinar, and we will be sure to get to them. And if we can't, we'll follow up with an email to respond to your questions. That being said, I will turn it over to our first presenter, Ryan King, to discuss capturing data throughout the guest journey.
Thanks, Free. Let's go ahead. First slide, Free. So I think the first thing when we talk about capturing data is, what comes into the POS or the PMS. Clearly, when we get a direct booking, it's a wonderful thing. We can ask the guest that's coming in all sorts of information about themselves, and we're able to grab that information and action off of it. GDS is a little different. The travel agents, as we know, that's been a long time standing thing. They own the client. The GDS reservations really are only going to come over with that basic information. That corporate traveler, we're never going to be able to capture anything additional for them. But where we seem to have this line challenge is, with our OTA partners. And gosh, it is a constant seesaw battle. OTAs believe that they own the guest. We believe that we own the guest. As a hotelier, they're staying with us. They're not staying with the OTA. And as you look over the landscape, OTAs will continue to own a good portion of our bookings in the hotel. I think the latest research shows that total hotel bookings is on an average of about 21%. But they keep increasing. And, as we spend more money trying to advertise against the OTAs, they spend more money. It was Marriott who did a big campaign and spent millions of dollars trying to counteract some of the OTAs. And of course, the OTAs doubled down, and to the Marriott's millions, they spent billions. So their growth was still higher than Marriott, which is considered a very large, vulnerable brand. So it's a fact that we're not going to get away from, and we do have to play nicely with this, but we want to own this data. So we need to kind of start thinking about what it is that we can do to use the OTAs as a referral and as a booking, but own the guest after that experience they have with us. This is really part of what comes up as a concentrated necessity of collecting the right data and having a plan to get this data in place before you can really have a comprehensive marketing strategy against it. I think basic thing that we've spoken about for quite a bit of time is capturing emails. That has always been a big deal for us to do, and I will say some people do it better than others. I can be accused of doing a mediocre job to an okay job at times. We ran incentives for our front desk agents, on who gathered the most emails for the month, and we would run little campaigns to see who could, get more of the guest data. But it's such a onerous task, and you really need to be on top of it, and it has to be something that you think about and say, I have to have a coordinated plan for this. The easiest thing that we can do nowadays is let the guests know that we would like to email them their bill. This has been a boon, I think, in collecting emails for a lot of hotels, because it's become a more common practice for the guests to want to walk out without a piece of paper in their hand. And that's really just been the evolution over the last couple of years. So this is probably the easiest way to do it. The second one, of course, is to ask them, information for a survey or something like that. Not always as fruitful, because not everybody wants to get a survey, but it's really necessary for you to think about that. In the last, say, 24 months or so, there's been a lot of conversation about how hotel guests are going through the same digital journey that the, say, airline customer guests are. We're sharing these customers. They're getting on a plane, and more than half the time they're staying in a hotel. So they're doing the same process, and now the hotel world is catching up a little bit more about this. And it becomes a little easier to start talking about, how do I capture information then from a digital perspective? What can I do to prompt this guest as they go through? This is a lot easier than a conversation that a front desk person has. Through these systems, we can go ahead and we can prompt the guest to put in a phone number or an email. And the phone numbers become almost a replacement to the value of what an email is, because through a phone number, we can do a lot of an automated type of in-house messaging, as well as pre and post stay capture information. So it's a great way for you to kind of sit there and say, as I move into the 21st century with my hotel technology and I'm looking at this, what can I do to help this guest journey? And I will tell you, self-service type of tools that are out there in the technology right now, while that name self-service to hotels sometimes has a negative connotation, is high demand to the traveler. And it is something that when you implement, you'll find there's a lot of value behind how this helps your data collection, and really the solidity of this data that you're going to get, because there's not going to be a mistake in somebody writing it down. The guest is actually putting it in themselves. So I think, when it comes down to it, giving the guests a couple different ways to give you this information is very important. And one of those is, promoting online check-in on your website, having kiosk check-ins that come through the hotel. All of this is going to help you prompt other things that come along. And I think it's important to understand, as you get this information and you get into a cadence, what that is really going to be. We have a couple of our, clients that I think do things really well. I'm showcasing Aria Hotel. Clearly, not everybody's this size, but everybody can do some of the things that they do. They capture almost 40% of the guests that are checking in through a mobile check-in. So they're getting a lot of information about this guest, and they're delighting the person at the time that the person's getting ready to travel to the hotel. This is giving them the ability to do a lot of things. As we talk about with data, the other thing that we want to do with it is use it to put offers and promos in place that are going to increase our average check. So it's really important to sit here and say, hey, look how important this is when I can get somebody traveling through this way. Not only am I going to give them an experience that they're delighted by, but I'm going to further my cause and my mission, make my operations run smoother, and increase my RevPAR ultimately over the course of time.
Awesome, Ryan. So I thought it was interesting that you talked about really putting the control in the hands of the guests to essentially choose how they want to be serviced. And in doing so, the hotel is able to kind of take a step back, gather important information without being intrusive. Now, how does that coincide with, as we talked about, typically what hotels think of as supreme service, where they want to control what the idea of great service is?
Yeah, that's great, Free. I think this is where we, talk about activating that data and how we manage it to interact with our guests. The idea of service has changed so much, and we talk about millennials a lot, but they're not the only ones that are looking for this. I think it's really important that you think about how this data comes in and what we're doing when we collect it. We're bringing all this in order to have a deposit repository in the PMS to be able to now communicate with these things. But the PMS is not an island. It can't do anything unless you're connecting these things to other systems. So it's really important to think about what that interconnected guest journey experience looks like for your guest. With a lot of the millennials, they're so involved with their phones, and I'm sure you've all seen this, as you're walking down the street, people are reading their phones. I was at dinner the other night, there was two people sitting at the table across from us and they were both on their phones. It's just a fact of life. It's something that we all do now. It's something that, as we go forward, it's there. These phones, these ubiquitous devices that we have, they're now part of our everyday life. It's how we communicate. We've been saying for a long time, this is the new norm. And it's important to understand, this is a great way to think about how you engage with your guests. So I talked a little bit about email addresses, and then I talked about phone. And one of the things that I think is important in this is to understand how these type of things can be used to activate a guest to do something. A guest is going to respond to you based on you sending them something that's relevant at the right time. We call this at times the in-the-moment sales pitches, or that impulse buying. Retail's been doing it for decades. Why do you think when you go up to the cash register, there's little items sitting around there? It's because they have carefully tracked those items and the price point of those items to know that this increases their average wallet as these people walk out of the store. So doing the same thing in the hotel world is possible. We just have to look at the data that we have and analyze it, and then produce the right content at the right time. So this goes down, and this talks about, doing things that we can, give the guests. I will say that some of our hotels that utilize our Zest web and Zest Station products really increase a lot of their incidental revenues by just offering a late checkout. And oftentimes these late checkouts are only like 3 o'clock or something of that nature. It's stuff that as hoteliers we do right now, but now they're putting it in somebody's hands and they're saying, hey, yeah, it's time to check out. You can be on your phone. You can, let's say, you know what, gosh, I'm finishing up my meeting, or we're sightseeing the city and our flight's not till 4. Oh, if I could check out 3, that'd be great. For 25 bucks, I'm sold. Great customer service, great option for the guest, incredible revenue for the hotel. So this is one of the easiest things that you can start to do when you start thinking about, how can I activate this data I have and send something to the guest using this device that they're on. Think of this as another way of doing things. If we have their phone number, we can send them SMS or text messages, or WeChat or whatever that we know that they're on, and we can do in-stay purchases. We can send things to them that we know, hey, this person in the past, everybody that's gone to our bar, send a message about a 2-for-1 drink in the bar or a free appetizer. We're using the data, we're activating an offer, and we're sending it to people that are most likely to buy it. Same thing when they're checking in. We talk about that impulse buy. We're sending out, the more sophisticated ones, we're sending out things on our confirmation letters about upgrades. We're sending them out in their pre-stay messages. when they're most likely to purchase is right before they check in. So if we're sending out room upgrades or incidentals based on what we know of these people or how we're doing things, we're going to be able to increase our extra revenue. So it's really about taking that data, looking at the communication vehicles that we have with our guests via text and email, and knowing how to push out those offers, and really studying that data and understanding what offer worked well, what communication worked well. Did I get more conversions when I sent this offer out via SMS, or did I do better when I sent this out at a check-in point via email? So a lot of this data is really down to taking your technology, understanding your technology stack and what you want to achieve and what tools there are to you, what your budgets are, and putting this together. It takes a little bit of time to sit there in the hotel world and think about it, but ultimately this is going to lead to a better guest experience and increased revenues for the hotel.
Awesome, Ryan. And one more just follow-up question. So we talked about so much data out there, and obviously for multi-groups or chains, brands, that's a lot of data. So how do they, or how can they bring the data from all those different sources into one place?
Yeah, what a great idea. Data can sometimes be analysis paralysis, so it's important to understand what you're looking for and use data to really visualize what you want to achieve. So if you go into it with a goal, you're going to get a much better response. Actually, I think Snapshot, who's Iris is going to talk a little bit about, the visualization of the data really helps bring it to life and can help you accomplish a lot more.
Awesome. And with that, we will turn things over to Iris, who's going to speak about designing and building a comprehensive data strategy. Iris?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Ryan. That's actually a very good cue here, because if we look at all the data hotel has available, then like a lot of what Ryan mentioned in his part was is already part of that, and like largely here in the operations section. So every action and task in a hotel generates data. So for example, the bookings made via the OTA and entered into the PMS, or when a housekeeper finishes cleaning a room and inputs the completion into a software, that's data. Or when a receptionist checks a guest into the room, that is data. Or more on the F&B side, when a guest orders room service and informs you of their food selection, that is data. And it's a well-known fact, and as well as you can see it here, that hospitality organizations deal with many more systems besides those more operational PMS or POS systems. But for example, the CRSs, the GDSs, the OTAs, and so on. So with all this data, which the hotels have stockpiled in those operational systems or in their secondary platforms like the online travel agency partners, or even in tertiary platforms for functions like SaaS systems and messaging. With all this data, just collecting it and keeping is just not enough to benefit from its value, like Ryan was already alluded to. So by realizing the advantage of this data sooner rather than later, the hotels that do catch on this first can benefit from the data technology before the rest of the industry. And this is what we're going to look at a bit. Next, please. So if we look at big data, it is a major component of every industry, right? And the hospitality industry is no exception here. So knowing how to recognize and utilize the big data to your hotel's advantage will unlock great amounts of power. However, to have the access to this data is one thing, but to maximize this big data it needs to be more actionable and clearly defined, and for that you will need a detailed data strategy. So if we look at the examples here, if you take children, for example, and we all have been children, some of us might be raising children, and we all know how hard it is to get them to clean up, or how hard it was for us as kids to clean up. So if we use this metaphor of a child playing in a room, and when you arrive, like on the first picture, it's like a complete mess with toys and books and clothes everywhere. As an adult, you will immediately start thinking of how you could clean up the mess into like a more organized state. But this is how today's data points often look like if they're not properly structured and well managed. And without the organization of any form, without taking care of your data, big data is just like a gigantic room with data points scattered around and thrown everywhere. And that is a big data problem and time to clean up. However, the industry average, these hotels, they tend to use like still premise-based technology and have usually invested less in technology solutions, which means they have a lower value assigned to data. So when it comes to the level of data sophistication among those industry average hotels, they have usually only the tools to conduct basic data reporting. And given that these hotels are predominantly still using on-premise technology with little integrations, they are naturally creating data silos through that. As well, due to the tendency then to retain the data in their systems and the difficulty of sending data from A to B, so with little hope of any analysis on that. Usually, like the mid-larger groups are a little more advanced on that already. So if we're returning to the child metaphor, progress in cleaning up a room and managing structured or unstructured data can then be looked at as a data lake management problem. So you see that some improvements have been made already. It's great to know where the data is, but really all you've done at that point is to clean up the room by moving the data into the closet or into the child's toy box. And so there's still many steps to take to convert that data into information or even knowledge, which should be the ultimate goal, to work the data properly. So hotels that fall under this category tend to be mid-sized to larger groups, and they do understand already that like data has a value and have potentially invested more than the industry average in technology, most likely as well being on cloud solutions, like when it comes to PMS or when it comes to other systems. And they have started on data, started on evolving a data strategy. So essentially the data lakes copy data from one place to another, but the data is still left in its unstructured or structured form. So while it is not impossible to find and manage, you still need to use a variety of tools and systems to work with the data you need, right? And data lakes as such can serve as a temporary storage solution of the data management problem, but are not the end of the failure. The smart groups then have, sorry, freely. The smart groups have then taken it a step further. So the data hubs are one solution that those smart groups in the hospitality industry are using, and those are the ones who are placing already a high value on data and are utilizing help to properly collect and harmonize and prepare the data for deeper analysis. But this is still in our industry fairly rare. While some investment is ongoing in the understanding of the value of the data, like those smart groups are actually then looking at data aggregation and predictive analytics and deeper mining. I know quite a few companies actually starting to invest in having a team member, like a data scientist on board, like even for larger hotel groups. And then we look at the tech titans like the Amazons, Apples, Googles, Facebooks, whoever, who have really paved the way for the tech industry and are still doing so. And more like examples of those tech titans becoming involved in the hospitality industry. Like if you take, for example, Amazon, that have launched Alexa for hospitality for hotel rooms, or Google Travel being involved in the industry by combining mapping, search, and hospitality data. So while hotel brands that are among the industry averages or semi-aware can still resist changes, it will still be futile and at a cost, because I mean, we all know from our own behavior, consumers are self-driving this trend to having the data analyzed better, and those tech titans know that. So I guess it's really time that hospitality players realize the value of that data and how it is then driving the industry. So for us at Snapshot, we have a data platform, and we're evolving our data strategy to a data hub model to collect and harmonize data. And as Free was explaining in the introduction, we have more than 45 PMSs connected, but not only PMS data, we have as well non-PMS sources like benchmarking, social media reviews, and so on. So we offer the ability to move, abstract, and build on top of your data with advanced analysis and data visualization. So by incorporating a data hub into your data strategy, your hotel actually begins to open up to even more capabilities for next level data management, which could be then AI operations, machine learnings, or predictive analytics, and which would then help in some of the points which Ryan referred to earlier already. So how does one go about building a data strategy? So let's imagine a world where you have the ability to predict your guests' future purchases, like their wants and needs, like similar to what some of those tech titans are doing already. So predictive analysis is achieved when the full advantage of data is taken and is then applied through a combination of algorithms and machine learning to make those predictions of which future outcomes are more likely. To begin with, a data management program needs to be put in place where the development, execution, and supervision of all plans and programs that will deliver and control and enhance the value of the data and information are really managed. However, that cannot be or should not be the final result smart organizations are then aiming at to achieve. The data needs to evolve into information from linking these accessible data elements, which then lead to data exploration. And only when you do that, then the data becomes information. And once the data and information are managed and available for exploration, you can then build data strategy by design as an extension of the basic data management program. And at that point, data really becomes of value to your organization. So during those deliberate design phases, the focus of an organization is not on the quantity of the data, but really needs to be on the quality of the data. And that will drive like an organizational maturity if you treat this information as invaluable and as a strategic company asset. And based on that, you can then drive the knowledge to decision making, to have multiple sources of truth, and open new opportunities for mining the rich and the information sets beyond the knowledge level, so that you are getting, like, in combining data, information, knowledge to like a wisdom where the maturity, like organization reaches is as a point of applied data knowledge, right? So here at that point, we're not talking any longer on simple report aggregation or revenue optimization, but really treating data as a science. And with that, like at that level of data maturity, then it becomes a competitive advantage and enable an organization to become really an industry leader. So if we look at exactly on how to build such a data strategy, we need to take certain factors into consideration. Next slide. So, like, as I said, we have the valuable asset, the data being the valuable asset you need to consider. And here it's like you will find on this slide quite a few items Ryan has referred to before. So for example, it is very, like, if you consider your data as your valuable asset, you will make sure that the email addresses are entered, that your data is protected, that you will clean up your data by simply looking for duplicate profiles, for example. You will make sure that you train and educate your staff, that you look at the structured and unstructured data, and take in data sources from everywhere. I mean, unstructured data could be like just things like comments on a reservation. You need to then look at how to move and harmonize your data. So you take them off the silos and adopt cloud services. Great if you're using a cloud PMS. There's other software out there which can be used to enhance, and here integrations to outside core systems are really of high relevance there. And then if you look at to leverage that data, that knowledge you have, you know, the upselling opportunities, or like, you know, if you consider that, like, with that information, you can know the precise moment to send that special offer to your customer. Or consider the data you could have from your Wi-Fi or about your guests. So this data then needs to be additionally enhanced and optimized so that you can drive the right conclusions from it.
Awesome. Thank you, Iris, so much for really kind of digging deep into building an actual data strategy that takes into account all the data that's being captured throughout the guest stay and even prior to the guest stay, and kind of taking that to the next level and activating that data. So I hope that our audience have learned that capturing data is not enough. It's essentially just noise until you actually activate it with a strategy in mind. And with that said, I wanted to turn things over to our audience to go ahead and begin asking questions. The floor is open. It has been open up until this point. So we'll jump into the first question for you, Iris, as a follow-up. What are the methods used to harmonize data?
Actually, it sounds more complex than it is really. I mean, you can start already on PMS level by simply ensuring that you, for example, have the right codes entered on a reservation, so and so on. But then, if we're looking at a level beyond the one system, then the harmonization takes place by organizing the data and aligning the data so that it can then be processed further.
And what system would essentially be used as the system of record?
That really depends on if you're looking at if the PMS is your source of truth, then if you're having a cloud PMS, then and with the right integrations, then that could already be that system of record. But you could as well be using an analytics tool to combining that data, or it could even be if you have a proprietary CRS or CRM.
Awesome. Here's a question for you, Ryan. How do you figure out what offers to give guests when they're checking in?
Oh, great question. I think this goes back to what we've been talking about is having that data strategy. So I love the word harmonize. It's just a bunch of noise until you harmonize the data. So you've got to kind of put things together to understand, and you have to try a few different things. So when you put an offer out, you need to start looking at what the conversion of that offer is. You need to start measuring the price points. You need to take into effect what your weekday traveler versus weekend. If you're a resort, your weekend traveler is going to pay more. If you're a city hotel, your weekday traveler is on an expense account. So you need to kind of look through what these offers are that you're offering and then evaluate them on that. When it comes to things like early check-ins and late checkouts, I always tell hotels, these are the same type of things that have to do with rates. You can't just set it and forget it. You've got to look at your data and you've got to assess, hey, if I'm charging, $25 at 3 p.m. and in the last 4 weeks, I have, sold 15 late checkouts each time, what would happen if I lowered it to 15 if I wanted to sell 50? Would I? Or if I only have 5, should I be raising this to 50? So you really have to take and look at this data and make sure you have a clear picture of what you want to do.
All right, and this one is for you, Iris. Is the harmonizing of data a manual process or automated?
It can be both, but mostly with the amount of data we have today, it needs to be an automatic process. So as I said before, you can do some of it yourself by just simply, like when you train your staff to really look at the cleanliness of data, of ensuring that they know your strategy and they follow that. But a lot of that needs to happen in an automatized way, where systems which can deal with the huge amounts of data and which can potentially look beyond what you can see, like for example, analyze unstructured data, like your guest comments, can actually bring together what you in a manual way couldn't do.
Yeah, I agree with you, Iris. I remember a little further back, but we would sit in the hotel looking at these Excel spreadsheets, and it took a lot of brain power to bring these different Excel spreadsheets together to figure out, okay, I've got this, I've got that, and I've got the other. But with modern platforms, and as a shout out to Snapshot, the visualization and bringing the pieces together, it makes it easier to understand when you use technology tools nowadays to answer the questions you're looking at.
And you have a great point there, Ryan. Like Excel sheets is still what many of these hotels are looking at and feel comfortable with. But when you show them that, like with a visualization, they can actually combine those, that really opens up like a whole new world for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ryan, this one is for you. Most of the guests do not want to share their contact info to not receive any advertisements, even when we tell them that we will send a survey upon checkout to serve them better. They do not want to give their email nor phone number. What would you offer to get the contact infos of the guests?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have some people that just outright refuse, right? They're like, I don't want to give it to you, and you can't necessarily change their mind. But there's others that you can get the information out of. I will say nowadays, the biggest thing, and as I said before, it's the folio. Hey, would you like us to email you your bill at the end of the stay? Most people are going to say yes nowadays. It's so much easier to organize, your receipts when you have to do an expense report. You don't want to walk out, if you're on vacation, you're not interested in sitting and carrying that piece of paper. So it's an easier way to get it. You do need to think about your specific property and what you can accomplish, and then kind of come up with a strategy from there. Make
Okay.
sure not everybody is going to give it to you. And if they don't, they don't.
And a follow-up here. Additionally, for the loyalty program of the hotel, we ask for email addresses, but they give us the wrong address.
Yeah, well, that's a common strategy nowadays. Guests are so overburdened by the amount of emails they get from everybody. I mean, I personally have a burner email that I give. This goes back to why, the cell phone number is becoming so important. But I would caution you on sending offers on the cell phone that are not specifically enticing to the person, because you will quickly get people ignoring what you send. But if you send them something based on past purchases or in buying intent, then you'll get conversion.
Yeah, that's where the incentive comes in. So if you understand what it is that they're interested in because of information or data that you have that speaks to their purchase behavior or interest that they've already, told you about, then you can send them messages that are directly related to their interests, and that's
Yep.
an incentive to give you maybe real information.
Yeah, and always think about how that person has purchased you. People that purchase a non-refundable rate and prepaid a month out are more price conscious. People that are purchasing your full rate or an upgraded room type are less price conscious. So always, you got to think about these things, and that's why it's so important to think about that data and be able to visualize, hey, who's coming in? What does it look like? What do we want to send folks?
Mm-hmm.
And I think as well, like you really have to have your staff trained, right? Because like nothing is more annoying than at a receptionist where you ask like, why do you need my email address? And she says, just because I've been told so. That's really the hard part. So training your staff for the right response is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question here. Can the system recognize the return guests and first-time guests and generate the report? I'm not sure what system they're talking about, if it's PMS. Ryan, I guess that'd be you.
Well, I think in general, the first thing to say that, based on what your guest journey should look like, the answer is yes. There is technology out there nowadays that can do this. It's a combination of things. So it comes into what you want to do. Like our system can work with CRM systems to be able to know when a returning guest is coming in, and we can prompt offers based on that.
Iris, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. There is like great systems out there which can do that, but of course, like, when we think of some of the GDPR difficulties we have, for example, in Europe, then it makes it harder these days because not every, like on the first contact, you might not always get that information, for example, from an OTA or whatever to make the match. So it's even more important that at the time of check-in, your staff is alert to actually get that information.
Yeah, just keep in mind it's all about the guest journey. We work with partners, and I'll say give a shout out to Avio. They're doing some pretty inventive stuff. Avio's booking engine recognizes a person that came and shopped but didn't book, and when they come back, they can actually have a little thing on there that says, "Hi Ryan, welcome back," and it can, store the information based on cookies. Of course, if the cookies are live.
All right, I think that wraps things up for us here. Any final thoughts from our presenters? You guys are all talked out.
I would say, from my standpoint, I love technology. There's so many things out there in your reach for any budgets, and I'll tell you, for any budgets, and that's the big thing. The thing about technology that's changed radically in the last couple years is that the price of getting into these systems. So if you have a 75-room hotel, you can easily play just like the big brands. You just have to think about, what does my guest journey look like? What do I want to accomplish? And then look at the people that can help you accomplish those things. These are conversations that we have on a regular basis. It's stuff that I always get excited about when somebody tells me what they want to do, and we sit there and talk about it. It's great when you start thinking more about, what does your guest journey look like, and what do you want to accomplish that's going to help you give a better experience, get better reviews, and make more money.
Absolutely. Iris?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think really no one should shy away from building a data strategy because of financial impact. Today, there is, for every wallet, there is a solution. And already, if you start already looking at what you have at the property and taking a better care of it, potentially looking at adopting more cloud services, which usually have a better interaction with other systems, then you're already on the right way.
All right, thank you guys for joining us today, and for giving us your insight, giving our audience much insight on this topic. And I want to thank our audience for sticking with us the whole way through. Just to follow up, we will give you guys the recording as well as a presentation within 24 hours of the live broadcast, so look out for that. And with that, I say good day.